The explosions had stopped. The screaming had stopped. Even the sound of gunfire that had echoed through the streets of New Busan for 3 weeks had finally gone quiet. Commander Hyunwoo pressed his back against the concrete wall and listened to the terrible silence that meant his world had fallen. Smoke drifted through the broken windows of what used to be the colony's main hospital, the building where his wife had worked as a doctor before the aliens came, the building where she had died trying to save wounded civilians when the first bombing started. Hyunwoo closed his eyes and tried not to think about that day. "Sir," Lieutenant So-young whispered from across the rubble-filled room. Her uniform was torn and dirty. Blood from a cut on her forehead had dried on her cheek. "The last radio contact went dead 10 minutes ago. I think we are all that is left." Hyunwoo looked around at the 15 soldiers who remained from his battalion. 3 weeks ago he had commanded 800 men and women. They had fought hard. They had fought smart. But the aliens had too many ships, too many soldiers, too much technology. The orbital defense platforms had been destroyed on the first day. The evacuation ships never made it past the blockade. Through the broken wall he could see alien aircraft flying low over the city. The Vrathari ships looked like giant insects with their 6 wings and curved metal bodies. Behind them came the heavier transport craft carrying ground troops. The occupation was beginning. "How many civilians are left in the tunnels?" Hyunwoo asked. So-young checked her tablet. The screen was cracked but still worked. "Maybe 3,000. They are scared. They want to know what to do. 3,000 people hiding in the subway tunnels and maintenance shafts beneath the city. Families with children, old people, workers who had come to this planet to build a new life far from Earth. They were looking to him for answers he did not have. Hyunwoo had been born on Earth in the crowded cities of Korea. His parents had saved money for years to buy passage to the colonies where there was space to breathe and room to grow. He had joined the Colonial Defense Corps because he believed in protecting that dream. Now the dream was burning around him. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Sergeant Minho, the oldest soldier in the group. His hair was gray and his hands shook from exhaustion, but his eyes were still sharp. Hyunwoo stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, he could see alien soldiers setting up checkpoints on the main roads. They moved with the confidence of conquerors. Their purple armor gleamed in the sunlight. The Vrathari were tall and thin with 4 arms and skin like leather. They had been expanding their empire for 100 years, taking worlds from younger species who could not fight back. "We go underground," Hyunwoo said. "We protect the civilians and wait." "Wait for what?" So-young asked. "The fleet is gone. Earth does not even know what happened here yet." Hyunwoo pulled out his communication device. It was military grade, designed to work even when everything else failed. He had used it to send one last message before the communication array was destroyed. A coded message that only certain people would understand. A message that contained 4 simple words that might mean everything or nothing. "The iron blooms in winter," he had transmitted into the dark. He did not know if anyone had received it. He did not even know if the people who were supposed to receive it still existed. But it was the only hope he had left. "We wait because that is what soldiers do," he told his troops. "We protect people and we wait for help to come." Above them, Admiral Thex of the Vrathari Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his victory unfold below. The human colony had been tougher than expected. The defenders had used clever tactics and fought longer than most species did. But in the end, numbers and technology had won as they always did. Thex was old for a Vrathari, his purple skin marked with the scars of a dozen campaigns. He had conquered worlds for the Empire since before these humans had even left their home planet. This victory would add another star to his uniform and another planet to the Empire's growing collection. "How many human ships escaped?" he asked his aide. "None, Admiral. The blockade held perfectly. A few small craft tried to break through, but they were all destroyed." "Good. What about ground resistance?" "Scattered groups hiding in the ruins. Nothing organized. Our troops will hunt them down within a few days." Thex nodded. It was always the same. The defenders fought hard at first, then broke apart when their main forces were defeated. After that, it was just a matter of time before the survivors surrendered or were eliminated. The humans would be no different. "Begin full occupation procedures," Thex ordered. "I want mining operations started within a week. This planet has good mineral deposits. The Empire will profit well from this conquest." Down in the tunnels beneath New Busan, Hyunwoo gathered the civilian leaders around a makeshift table made from broken concrete and metal pipes. The tunnel system was extensive, built to handle the city's growing population. It had become their refuge and their prison. The aliens are setting up permanent positions, he told them. They are here to stay. We need to organize if we want to survive. Dr. Kyung-min, who had been treating the wounded in the tunnels, looked up from her medical supplies. How long can we hide down here? We have food for maybe 2 weeks. Medicine for less than that. We will find ways to get supplies, Hyunwoo said. The aliens do not know these tunnels like we do. We can move without being seen. Engineer Jae-sung, who had helped build the tunnel system, spread out blueprints on the table. There are access points all over the city. Power junctions, water mains, communication lines. If we are careful, we can reach any part of the city without going above ground. So Young studied the maps. We could set up supply runs. Hit their warehouses. Take what we need. That would bring retaliation, warned teacher Hai-jin, who had been caring for the children. They will hurt civilians if we attack them. They will hurt civilians anyway, Hyunwoo said quietly. That is what conquerors do. Our choice is to die slowly or fight back. The group fell silent. These were not soldiers. They were ordinary people who had come to a new world to build peaceful lives. War had found them anyway. What about Earth? Asked Dr. Kyung-min. Will they send help? Hyunwoo thought about the message he had sent. 4 words that might mean salvation or might mean nothing at all. He thought about projects and programs that existed only in rumors and whispers. He thought about the possibility that humanity had secrets the galaxy did not know about. I do not know, he said honestly, but we have to believe that someone is coming. We have to survive long enough to be rescued. As night fell over the conquered city, Hyunwoo walked through the tunnels checking on his people. Children slept on blankets spread over concrete floors. Adults whispered in small groups, planning and hoping. His soldiers cleaned their weapons and counted ammunition they could not replace. In his pocket, the communication device remained silent. No answer to his desperate message. No sign that anyone had heard his call for help. But he kept it close anyway, because hope was sometimes all that stood between survival and surrender. Above ground, alien patrols walked the empty streets of New Busan. They had won a great victory. They controlled the planet. They owned the future. They had no idea that deep below, in tunnels they did not know existed, the seeds of resistance were taking root, and they had no idea that somewhere far away, powerful people had received a message that would change everything. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Captain Jinsu felt his ship shaking as another piece of damaged hull plating tore loose. The UEA frigate Incheon had been beautiful once, with clean lines and bright metal that reflected the stars. Now it limped through space like a wounded animal, held together by emergency welds and the desperate prayers of its crew. How much longer to Seoul? Jinsu asked his navigator. 8 hours, sir. Maybe 10 if we lose another engine. Jinsu nodded and tried not to think about the alien pursuit ships that might be following them. The Incheon had been on patrol near the Kepler system when the attack began. They had tried to help, but one small frigate against an entire alien fleet was suicide. The best they could do was rescue a few escape pods and run for home. In the ship's medical bay, the survivors from Kepler 442b lay in recovery beds. Most were unconscious, their bodies broken by the violence of war. But one man remained awake, staring at the ceiling with eyes that had seen too much. Corporal Woo Jin had been part of Commander Hyunwoo's final transmission team. Captain, Woo Jin called out when Jinsu came to check on the wounded. Did you get the message? The coded transmission? Jinsu pulled out a datapad and showed Woo Jin the recording. 4 words that had been transmitted just before the communication array was destroyed. The iron blooms in winter. What does it mean? I do not know, Woo Jin admitted. Commander Hyunwoo made me memorize it. He said if anything happened, someone had to get it to Earth. To the right people. He said it was important. What right people? I do not know that either. But he was very serious about it. More serious than I had ever seen him. Jinsu studied the message again. It made no sense to him, but Hyunwoo had been a good officer. If he thought it was important, then it was important. When they reached Earth, Jinsu would make sure the right people received it, even if he had to deliver it personally to Fleet Command. 3 days later, the Incheon docked at Luna Station, humanity's main military base orbiting Earth's moon. Jinsu had sent the coded message ahead, marking it as urgent military intelligence. He expected to hand it over to some communications officer and never hear about it again. Instead, he found himself standing in a secure conference room facing Admiral Mi-kyung, one of the highest-ranking officers in the United Earth Alliance. She was younger than he expected, maybe 40 years old, with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that made junior officers stand straighter. "Captain Jin-soo," she said, reading from his file, "you have served with distinction for 12 years. Your record shows excellent judgment under pressure. That is why I'm going to tell you something that could get us both executed if it leaks to the wrong people." Jin-soo felt his stomach drop. "Ma'am, the message you carried from Kepler 442b was not random words. It was a code phrase that activates the most classified project in human history. A project so secret that only 50 people in the entire alliance know it exists." Admiral Mi-kyung led him through a series of security checkpoints that went deeper and deeper into the lunar base. Scanners checked his DNA, his retinal patterns, even his brain waves. Finally, they reached a level that Jin-soo had never known existed. "Welcome to Project Iron Winter," Mi-kyung said as massive blast doors opened before them. The chamber beyond was enormous, carved out of solid rock and filled with technology that Jin-soo did not recognize. Scientists and engineers worked at stations covered with displays showing equations that hurt his head to look at. In the center of the room stood something that looked like a giant metal ring covered in spinning components. "What is this place?" Jin-soo asked. "This is where we have been preparing for the day when humanity would need to prove it belongs in this galaxy," Mi-kyung replied. "The aliens see us as young and weak. They think we are easy targets because we have only been in space for a few decades. They are wrong." Dr. Taeho approached them, his white coat stained with grease and his hair wild from too many sleepless nights. He had been working on the project since before Jin-soo was born, perfecting technology that the rest of humanity thought was impossible. "Admiral, the quantum tunnelers are ready for deployment. We can have the first wave through within 6 hours of your order." "Quantum tunnelers?" Jin-soo asked. Taeho smiled like a teacher explaining a favorite subject. "Most military forces think in terms of moving ships through space, which takes time. Months to cross between star systems, weeks to position fleets for battle. We have found a different way." He led them to a viewing window that looked down into a testing chamber. Inside, Jin-soo watched a soldier in strange armor step onto a platform. There was a flash of light and the soldier vanished. "Where did he go?" Jin-soo asked. "Mars," Taeho replied casually. "He will be back in 5 minutes to report that the test was successful. We can move individual soldiers or entire battalions anywhere in the galaxy almost instantly. No ships required, no warning given." Jin-soo stared at the empty platform. "That is impossible." "Impossible is what other species think," Mi-kyung said. "Humans specialize in making the impossible happen. While the galaxy has been perfecting conventional warfare, we have been perfecting something entirely new." She activated a wall display that showed star charts covering the entire local arm of the galaxy. Red dots marked alien-controlled systems. Blue dots marked human colonies. The red dots vastly outnumbered the blue ones. "Every military strategist looks at this map and sees an impossible situation," Mi-kyung continued. "Humanity is outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Traditional warfare says we should surrender or be destroyed, but we are not going to fight a traditional war." The soldier reappeared on the platform below, giving a thumbs up to indicate the test was successful. Jin-soo watched in amazement as the man simply stepped off the platform and walked away, as if teleporting to Mars was the most normal thing in the world. "How long have you been working on this?" Jin-soo asked. 40 years, Taeho replied. "We started the project the day we met our first alien species. We knew that someday we would need an advantage that no one expected. Conventional weapons and tactics can be countered by more weapons and better tactics. But how do you counter an enemy that can appear anywhere without warning?" Mi-kyung brought up another display showing personnel files. Hundreds of soldiers trained in equipment and tactics that the rest of the military had never seen. "The 1st Quantum Strike Division. 2,000 of our best soldiers equipped with technology that will rewrite the rules of warfare." "Who commands them?" Jin-soo asked. "Colonel Dongmin. He has been training for this mission his entire career. He and his soldiers have been preparing to do something that no military force in galactic history has ever attempted." The admiral activated a communication system, and within minutes, a tall man in an unusual uniform appeared on the screen. Colonel Dongmin looked like he could crush steel with his bare hands, but his eyes held the intelligence of someone who understood complex strategies. Colonel, we have received the activation code from Kepler 442b. Iron Winter is authorized. Understood, Admiral. How long do we have? Every day we wait, more civilians die. How quickly can you deploy? We can be ready in 12 hours. But ma'am, this will expose our capabilities to the entire galaxy. Once we do this, there is no going back to secret projects and hidden technology. Mi-kyung looked at the star chart again, at all those red dots representing conquered worlds and suffering populations. Colonel, humanity has been hiding long enough. It is time to show the galaxy what we are really capable of. Yes, ma'am. We will bring our people home. The transmission ended, and Jinsu found himself part of something larger than he had ever imagined. All around him, scientists and soldiers prepared for a mission that would either save humanity or doom it to galactic war. What happens now? He asked. Now we find out if 40 years of preparation was enough, Mi-kyung replied. In 12 hours, Colonel Dongmin and his strike force will attempt the largest quantum deployment in human history. They will appear over Kepler 442b without warning and take back our colony. And if it fails, then the galaxy will learn that humanity tried to fight back, that we did not go quietly into extinction. Sometimes that is enough. Jinsu thought about Commander Hyunwoo and the desperate message that had started all of this. 4 words that had activated humanity's greatest secret. He hoped that wherever Hyunwoo was, he was still alive to see what those words would bring. Above them, in orbit around Earth, the ships of the 1st Quantum Strike Division made their final preparations. They looked like no other vessels in the human fleet, designed for a type of warfare that no alien species had ever encountered. The iron was about to bloom in winter, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Klex of the Vrathari ground forces received the first report at dawn. One of his patrols had failed to check in during the night. 12 soldiers simply gone without any distress signal or sign of battle. The patrol route took them through the industrial district where broken factories and empty warehouses provided plenty of places to hide. Probably human survivors, his aides suggested, small groups setting ambushes. Klex studied the map of New Busan spread across his command table. The city was larger than he had expected, with underground areas that his forces had not fully explored. The humans who built it had been thorough, creating tunnels and maintenance passages that connected every major building. Double the patrols in that sector, he ordered, and start mapping those underground passages. I want to know every tunnel and every hiding place. What Klex did not know was that far below his command post, Commander Hyunwoo was watching alien movements through a network of surveillance devices that So-young had cobbled together from security cameras and communication equipment. The lieutenant had always been good with technology, and 3 weeks of desperate innovation had made her even better. They are increasing patrols, So-young reported, looking at the feeds from hidden cameras, but they are still following predictable patterns. Same routes, same timing, same group sizes? Hyunwoo nodded and marked patrol routes on his own map. After 3 weeks of watching alien movements, he could predict where they would be at any given time. The Vrathari were efficient and organized, but they were also creatures of habit. They followed procedures instead of adapting to changing situations. What about supplies? He asked. Sergeant Min-ho looked up from an inventory list. We hit their supply depot last night and got enough medical supplies to last another week. Food is still a problem, but Engineer Jae-sung found a way to tap into their water lines. The resistance had grown from 15 soldiers to nearly 50 fighters, as more civilians joined the cause. Dr. Kyungmin had trained medics. Teacher Hae-jin had organized children to serve as lookouts and messengers. Even elderly people contributed by maintaining equipment and preparing supplies. But Hyunwoo knew they could not win through guerrilla warfare alone. They were buying time, hoping that help would come from somewhere. Every day that passed without response to his coded message made that hope smaller. "Sir," called out Young Soo, one of the newer fighters who had joined after losing his family in the bombing. "There is something strange happening with the alien communications." So-young checked her monitoring equipment. She had managed to tap into some of the alien communication channels, though she could only understand fragments of their language. "They are reporting equipment failures, vehicles breaking down, computer systems malfunctioning. Sabotage?" Min-ho asked. "Maybe, but they sound confused about it, like they cannot figure out what is causing the problems." Hyunwoo frowned. His people were good, but they did not have the resources for large-scale sabotage operations. They were focused on small hit-and-run attacks that could be carried out with minimal equipment. Whatever was happening to alien systems was beyond their capabilities. 2 levels above them, Prathari technicians worked frantically to repair a communications array that had mysteriously failed during the night. The equipment showed no signs of damage or tampering, but critical components had simply stopped working. Similar failures were happening throughout the city. "This is the 4th major system failure in 2 days," reported Chief Technician Vex. "Power grids, vehicle engines, computer networks, all showing the same pattern of component degradation." Commander Klex examined the failed equipment. The technology looked fine on the outside, but internal scans showed that microscopic circuits had been somehow disrupted at the molecular level. It was unlike any sabotage technique he had encountered. "Could the humans have some kind of new weapon?" he asked. "Impossible," Vex replied. "Their technology level is decades behind ours. They do not have the capability to cause this kind of damage without physical access to the equipment." But the failures continued. Alien patrols found their weapons jamming at critical moments. Transport vehicles broke down in the middle of missions. Communication systems produced static instead of clear signals. The occupation force that had conquered the planet with overwhelming technological superiority was being slowly crippled by malfunctions they could not explain. In the tunnels below, Hyunwoo received reports from his scouts that grew more puzzling each day. Alien soldiers were becoming nervous and jumpy. They were calling for backup more often and spending more time checking their equipment instead of focusing on their missions. "Something is helping us," So Young said as she analyzed the latest intelligence reports. "The aliens are having too many problems for it to be coincidence, but I cannot figure out what is causing it." "Maybe Earth sent advanced scouts," suggested Dr. Kyungmin. "Special forces teams with new technology." Hyunwoo wanted to believe that, but he had seen no signs of human military activity beyond his own resistance group. No additional supplies appearing mysteriously, no new weapons or equipment. Just the gradual degradation of alien systems that was making their occupation more difficult. What he could not see were the microscopic devices that had been dispersed throughout the city 3 days earlier. Advanced reconnaissance drones smaller than insects, invisible to conventional sensors, programmed to interfere with alien technology in subtle ways. They had been deployed by an advanced team that existed only as ghosts in the machine. Colonel Dongmin's quantum reconnaissance specialists had arrived ahead of the main force, materializing in empty buildings and abandoned areas where no one would notice their presence. Their mission was to gather intelligence and prepare the battlefield for the coming assault. Sergeant Su Jin crouched on the roof of a ruined apartment building, using equipment that could analyze alien communications from several kilometers away. Her specialized gear looked like ordinary civilian electronics to casual observation, but it was actually more advanced than anything the aliens possessed. "I have identified 17 command posts and 43 equipment concentrations," she reported through a quantum communication link that the aliens could not detect. Deploying interference drones to key locations. The drones were one of humanity's greatest technological achievements. Each one contained quantum processors that could adapt to alien systems and find ways to disrupt them without causing obvious damage. They were designed to make the enemy's technology unreliable rather than destroying it outright. "Excellent work," Colonel Dongmin replied from his command ship still hidden in quantum space. "What about civilian casualties?" "Resistance Force is protecting approximately 3,000 civilians in the underground tunnel system. They have established an effective communication network and supply operation. Commander Hyunwoo is maintaining good discipline among his people." "How long until full deployment?" 6 hours, sir. All advanced teams are in position and target areas have been prepared." Back in the tunnels, Hyunwoo gathered his fighters for another planning session. They had been discussing a major operation against an alien supply convoy when So Young received an unusual signal on her monitoring equipment. "Sir, I am picking up something strange on the emergency frequencies. It sounds like a coded transmission, but not from the aliens." She adjusted her equipment and played the signal through speakers. It was faint and distorted, but clearly artificial. A pattern of electronic sounds that repeated every few minutes. "Can you decode it?" Hyunwoo asked. So Young worked at her equipment for several minutes, trying different frequency adjustments and filtering techniques. Slowly, the signal became clearer. It was not random noise. It was a structured message using an encoding system that seemed familiar. "Sir, she said quietly. This is using Korean military communication protocols. Old ones from before we joined the United Earth Alliance. Hyunwoo felt his heart beating faster. What does it say? It is just coordinates and a timestamp. But the coordinates are for locations all around the city, and the timestamp is for tonight, exactly 6 hours from now. Young-soo looked up from checking his weapon. Could it be Earth forces? A rescue mission? I do not know, Hyunwoo replied, but he thought about the 4 words he had transmitted into the darkness 3 weeks ago, words that might have reached people who could do the impossible. Above ground, Commander Klex received another report of missing patrols and equipment failures. His forces were still in control of the city, but their efficiency was declining rapidly. His superiors were demanding explanations that he could not provide. Sir, his communications officer reported, Admiral Thex wants to speak with you immediately. The conversation with his superior was not pleasant. Admiral Thex was frustrated with the slow pace of the occupation and the mysterious problems that kept occurring. He wanted the human resistance eliminated quickly so that mining operations could begin. Double your efforts, Thex ordered. Find these humans and destroy them. I will not tolerate continued delays. Yes, Admiral. We will intensify sweeps of the underground areas tomorrow, but tomorrow would be too late. High above the planet, reality was beginning to bend as quantum tunnels prepared to open. The technology that humanity had developed in secret for 40 years was about to be tested in actual combat for the first. The sky above Kepler 442b tore open like fabric being ripped apart. Space itself twisted and folded as quantum tunnels breached normal reality, creating holes in the universe that should not have existed. Admiral Thex watched from his flagship's bridge as his sensors screamed warnings that made no sense. What is happening? He demanded as his officers scrambled at their control stations. Unknown energy signatures detected, his sensor officer reported. Massive gravitational distortions appearing throughout the system. I have never seen readings like this. Are we under attack? I do not know, sir. The distortions are not following any known weapon pattern. They appear to be tears in space-time itself. Through the viewports, Thex could see points of light appearing in the darkness where no stars should exist. The lights grew brighter and larger, becoming circular rifts that revealed glimpses of somewhere else entirely. Then ships began emerging from the impossible openings. The vessels that came through the quantum tunnels looked unlike anything in Thex's experience. They were sleek and angular, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls showed no conventional weapon ports or engine exhausts, yet they moved with perfect precision and incredible speed. How many ships? Thex asked. I count 37 vessels of unknown configuration. But sir, they are not behaving like a normal fleet. They are appearing and disappearing randomly throughout our formation. Thex watched in growing alarm as the mysterious ships seemed to phase in and out of existence. One moment they would be visible on sensors, the next they would vanish completely, only to reappear behind his own vessels or in positions that should have been impossible to reach. Open fire, he ordered. All ships engage immediately. The Vrithari fleet opened fire with weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. Energy beams and missile barrages filled space with deadly light. But most of their shots passed through empty space where enemy ships had been moments before. The few hits that connected seemed to have no effect on the strange vessels. Sir, the enemy ships are not taking damage, his weapons officer reported. Our energy beams are passing right through them. That is impossible. Nothing can phase through solid matter. They appear to be shifting between different quantum states. When we fire at them, they exist in a different dimensional phase where our weapons cannot affect them. Colonel Dong-min stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the battle unfold through displays that showed both normal space and quantum dimensions. His vessel existed in multiple phases simultaneously, allowing it to be present in the battle while remaining untouchable by conventional weapons. Status report, he requested. Major Yoon-ji consulted her tactical displays. All ships have successfully deployed through quantum tunnels. Enemy fleet is in disarray. They cannot target us effectively while we are phase shifted. Casualties? 0, sir. Their weapons cannot penetrate our quantum shielding. Excellent. Begin Phase 2. Deploy ground forces to all target coordinates. Below on the planet's surface, Commander Hyunwoo led his resistance fighters through the tunnels toward the coordinates that had been transmitted by the mysterious signals. The underground passages echoed with distant explosions as the battle in space cast strange lights through gaps in the rubble above. "Are you sure about this?" asked Sergeant Minho as they approached the designated meeting point. "No," Hyunwoo admitted. "But staying hidden forever is not a plan. If someone is really trying to help us, we need to be there to meet them." So Young monitored her communication equipment as they moved. "The signals are getting stronger, and I am picking up new transmissions. Different encryption, but definitely human technology." They emerged from the tunnels into the basement of what had been the city's main power plant. The facility had been damaged in the initial bombing, but was still structurally sound. Hyunwoo positioned his fighters around the room and waited. At exactly the predicted time, the air in the center of the room began to shimmer. Reality twisted the same way it had in space, creating a circular opening that revealed a corridor filled with artificial light. Through the portal stepped soldiers in armor unlike anything Hyunwoo had ever seen. The newcomers moved with professional precision, securing the area before their leader stepped forward. She was a major by her insignia, with the confident bearing of someone who had done impossible things many times before. "Commander Hyunwoo?" she asked. "Yes, who are you?" "Major Yoonji, 1st Quantum Strike Division, United Earth Alliance. We received your message. Sorry we are late." Hyunwoo stared at the portal that had appeared from nowhere, at the soldiers whose equipment looked decades ahead of anything he knew existed, at the impossible rescue that was actually happening. "How is this possible?" he asked. "Humanity has been busy while you were holding the line," Yoonji replied. "We will have time for explanations later. Right now we need to get your civilians to safety and eliminate the alien occupation force." More soldiers came through the portal, along with equipment that floated without visible support and weapons that hummed with contained energy. They moved with the efficiency of troops who had trained for this exact mission. "How many people do you have?" Hyunji asked. 3,000 civilians, 50 fighters, Hyunwoo reported. "No problem. We can evacuate that number in 2 hours. But first we need to neutralize the alien forces so they cannot interfere with the evacuation. There are thousands of them. They have armored vehicles, aircraft, heavy weapons." "Not for much longer," Yoonji said with a smile that reminded Hyunwoo of his daughter when she was planning mischief. Throughout the city, reality continued to tear open as more quantum portals appeared. But instead of emerging in empty areas, these portals opened directly inside alien installations. Brathari soldiers found themselves facing human troops who had materialized in their command centers, their vehicle parks, their ammunition depots. Commander Klex was reviewing patrol reports when armed figures in unknown armor simply appeared in his command post. Before he or his guards could react, strange weapons fired beams that paralyzed rather than killed. Within seconds, his entire command staff was unconscious, and human soldiers were taking control of his equipment. The same scene played out across the city. Alien patrols found themselves surrounded by enemies who had appeared from nowhere. Vehicles stopped working as human technicians emerged from portals to disable critical systems. Communication centers went silent as quantum forces took control of transmission equipment. "This is impossible," Klex managed to say before the paralysis beam reached him. "You cannot teleport armies." "We are not teleporting," replied the human soldier standing over him. "We are using quantum tunneling technology. Your people said it was impossible, so you never developed countermeasures for it." In space, Admiral Thex watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by ships that refused to follow the rules of physics. His vessels, designed to fight conventional battles with conventional enemies, had no defense against weapons that could strike from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Sir, we have lost 60% of our fleet," his tactical officer reported. "The remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat." "Retreat? To where?" "These humans can apparently appear anywhere they want." As if summoned by his words, one of the human ships materialized directly in front of his flagship. At this close range, Thex could see details of its construction. The hull was smooth and seamless with no visible joints or access panels. It looked grown rather than built. A communication signal came from the human vessel. Thex accepted it, expecting to receive surrender demands. Instead, he found himself facing a human officer whose calm confidence was more terrifying than any threat could have been. "Admiral Thex," Colonel Dongmin said. "I am Colonel Dongmin of the United Earth Alliance. Your invasion of human territory is over. You will order your remaining ships to stand down and prepare to be escorted out of this system." You cannot defeat the entire Vrathari Empire with one fleet. Thex replied. We are not using one fleet. We are using a technology that makes fleets irrelevant. We can appear at any point in your empire whenever we choose. Your military doctrine is based on controlling space through ship positioning. That doctrine is now obsolete. Thex looked at his tactical displays, which showed human ships appearing and disappearing throughout his formation. His weapons were useless, his shields provided no protection, and his speed advantage meant nothing against enemies who could teleport. What are your terms? He asked. Complete withdrawal from all human territories, release of all human prisoners, recognition that humanity is not prey to be hunted by galactic empires. Below on the planet, Hyunwoo watched 3,000 civilians step through quantum portals that led directly to safety on distant human worlds. Children who had been hiding in tunnels for weeks walked into rooms filled with sunlight and clean air. Families separated by war were reunited with relatives who had escaped earlier attacks. Where are they going? He asked Yunji. Safe worlds far from any conflict zone. They will be cared for while we rebuild your colony. Rebuild? Commander, your message reached people who have been preparing for this day for 40 years. Humanity is done. 6 months after the liberation of Kepler 442b, Admiral Mi Kyung stood on the observation deck of the UEA Seoul and watched construction crews rebuild New Busan using technology that made the work look like magic. Buildings rose from rubble in days instead of months, their structures guided by quantum assemblers that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. The flagship itself was a demonstration of humanity's new capabilities. The Seoul could appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours, serving as a mobile command base that made traditional military logistics obsolete. Its mere existence changed the balance of power in ways that alien strategists were still trying to understand. Admiral, Captain Jinsu reported as he approached with the latest intelligence briefings. He had been promoted after his role in delivering the crucial message that started everything. We have responses from 17 different alien governments to our diplomatic proposals. How many are accepting our terms? All of them. Even the Korthani Empire has agreed to recognize human territorial claims and establish formal diplomatic relations. Mi Kyung was not surprised. The demonstration at Kepler 442b had been deliberately chosen to send a message to every major power in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the young, weak species that could be conquered or ignored. They were a force that could project power anywhere, anytime, without the limitations that constrained conventional military operations. On the planet below, Commander Hyunwoo walked through the rebuilt streets of his city and marveled at how quickly everything had changed. The tunnels where his people had hidden for weeks were now part of an expanded subway system that connected to quantum transport terminals. Citizens could travel between star systems as easily as they had once traveled between neighborhoods. Sir, Lieutenant So Young called out as she approached with a group of young engineers. She had been promoted and given command of the colony's new quantum communication array. The memorial ceremony is ready to begin. They gathered in the central square where a monument had been erected to honor those who had died defending the colony. The memorial was simple but powerful, a wall of black stone inscribed with names, surrounded by a garden where earth flowers grew alongside native plants from the colony world. Hyunwoo read the names of friends and colleagues who had not lived to see the liberation. His wife's name was there, along with hundreds of others who had died believing they were alone and forgotten. If only they could have known that help was coming, that humanity had capabilities beyond anything the galaxy imagined. They did not die for nothing, he said to the assembled crowd. Their sacrifice bought us time to survive until rescue came, and their memory reminds us that freedom always comes with a price. In the audience, Dr. Taeho watched the ceremony with mixed emotions. As one of the architects of Project Iron Winter, he had spent decades preparing for this moment. But the actual deployment had revealed capabilities even he had not fully understood. The quantum technology was evolving beyond its original design, developing new properties that opened possibilities he was only beginning to explore. Dr. Taeho? Young engineer Park Jun-ho approached after the ceremony. I have been studying the quantum tunnel systems, and I think there are applications we have not considered yet. Such as, the tunnels do not just allow transportation through space. They seem to allow limited access to parallel dimensional phases. We might be able to establish permanent research stations in alternate realities. Taeho smiled. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to take any discovery, and push it far beyond its original purpose. The quantum tunneling technology that had started as a military project was already being adapted for exploration, communication, and scientific research that would advance human knowledge by centuries. Across the galaxy, other species were making their own discoveries about humanity's new capabilities. The Vrathari Empire had attempted to develop countermeasures for quantum tunneling technology, only to discover that the principles involved were far more complex than they had realized. Former Admiral Thex, now serving as a diplomatic liaison between his people and humanity, submitted another report to his government about the impossibility of matching human quantum technology with conventional methods. "They are not simply using advanced engineering," he wrote. "They appear to have developed an entirely new understanding of physics itself. Our scientists estimate it would take us centuries to reach the same level of knowledge, assuming we could understand their theoretical frameworks at all." The report was one of hundreds being filed by alien military analysts who were trying to adapt to a galaxy where the rules had suddenly changed. Traditional strategies based on fleet movements and territorial control were obsolete when facing an enemy that could appear anywhere without warning. But humanity was not interested in conquest or domination. The demonstrations of power had been designed to establish respect, not fear. Admiral Meekyung's diplomatic initiatives focused on trade partnerships and scientific cooperation rather than military expansion. "We want to be partners, not rulers," she explained to a gathering of alien ambassadors aboard the Soul. "Humanity has capabilities that can benefit everyone, but only if we work together instead of fighting each other." The alien representatives were still adjusting to the idea of humans as equals rather than prey species. Some had difficulty accepting that the young civilization they had dismissed as weak was now the most technologically advanced power in the galaxy. Colonel Dongmin, now promoted to general, was establishing training centers where human quantum technologies would be shared with allied species. The first Quantum Strike Division had grown into an entire branch of the military, with new applications being developed constantly. "Sir," Major Yunji reported during their weekly briefing, "we have successfully deployed quantum research stations in the Andromeda Galaxy. The tunneling technology allows us to maintain real-time communication across intergalactic distances." "Excellent. What about the exploration missions?" "We have identified 17 potentially habitable worlds in previously unreachable star systems. Long-range quantum tunneling makes them accessible for immediate colonization if desired." Dongmin studied the star charts that now included regions of space that had been beyond human reach just months earlier. The galaxy was becoming smaller every day, as quantum technology eliminated the barriers of distance and time that had limited exploration and expansion. Back on Kepler 442b, Commander Hyunwoo received a message that made him smile for the first time in months. His brother, who had been serving on a distant mining station when the war began, had finally received news that Hyunwoo was alive and well. The quantum communication networks made it possible for families separated by interstellar distances to stay in contact. "The children want to know if they can visit Earth," So Young reported as she delivered the latest messages from evacuated families. "Now that travel between star systems only takes hours instead of months, they think of it as a day trip." "Maybe we should arrange some visits," Hyunwoo replied. "It would be good for them to see where humanity came from." The simplest requests revealed how dramatically everything had changed. Children who had been born on distant colony worlds could now visit their grandparents on Earth for dinner and be home in time for bed. Scientists could collaborate in person across galactic distances. Artists and musicians could share their work with audiences on hundreds of different worlds. Dr. Kyungmin, who had treated wounded civilians in the tunnels during the occupation, was now running a medical research center that had access to biological samples from across the galaxy. Quantum transportation made it possible to study life forms and medical conditions that had never been accessible to human science before. "We are learning more about galactic biology in 6 months than we learned in 50 years of limited exploration," she reported during a research conference that included participants from 12 different star systems. Engineer Jae Sung had been promoted to head of infrastructure development, designing cities that incorporated quantum transportation as naturally as previous generations had incorporated roads and bridges. His blueprints showed urban centers connected to multiple worlds, creating truly galactic communities. As the first anniversary of the liberation approached, Hyunwoo reflected on how much had changed since that desperate day, when he had transmitted 4 words into the darkness. The iron blooms in winter had been a call for help from a defeated commander, who had no idea what it would unleash. Now those words were engraved on monuments throughout human space, symbolizing the moment when humanity stopped hiding its capabilities and revealed its true place in the galaxy. The phrase had become a rallying cry for exploration, innovation, and the refusal to accept limitations that others considered absolute. The battle for Kepler 442b had been over when the aliens conquered the planet. But humanity had shown that battles, like all limitations, were temporary obstacles that could be overcome with sufficient determination and ingenuity. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and challenges that no single species could explore alone, but with quantum tunneling technology eliminating the constraints of distance and time, humanity was ready to help unlock those wonders for everyone.